We spent the last year going through different life hacks, facts, and mods to find the very best. And these are the 151 best things in Minecraft in 2023. Alright, last time we tested if you could subscribe in less than a second, and over 16,000 of you pulled it off. So this time, let's see if you can subscribe exactly when I hit the floor. Ready? Go. And even if you subscribed after, thank you, it means a ton. For this in Minecraft Illusion, you don't have to build anything. It's just gonna cost you 30 bucks, since that's the cost of a Minecraft account. Because truly, just having your skin set to one like this, we're able to make it so that when you look around in F5 and follow the camera, it seems as if the eyes are following you. And the reason for that happening is that we have the hat layer set up in such a way where it parallaxes against the background, making it look as if our eyes are following you, even if our head isn't. At first glance, these slimes look normal, until they start jumping, since now you can actually add the jump boost effect to slimes. And yeah, I don't really think they're coming down at this point. Here's how to use a boat to get through walls. Strange as it may seem, if you row your boat into a corner like this, then no matter how solid the wall is, whenever you dismount, you'll actually be ejected to the other side of that corner. So if you're looking for a sneaky way to get into your enemy's base without breaking any blocks, then 5 wooden planks is enough to do the trick. Just make sure when you leave to get rid of the boat, because nothing's gonna look more suspicious than a few pixels worth of planks poking through the wall. It's a dead giveaway for sure. With realistic water, that means that the water source is always constantly updating. And one of the first things you'll notice with that is something called displacement, which is that if you place a block within a water stream, it'll just cause the water to go elsewhere. And important to note is that if the water can't spread outwards, it'll just go up instead, which looks cool, but it can make it a real pain to clean up water spills. So if you don't have a bucket to pick up the water, you're not exactly going to be able to block it up like we used to. So you might want to spend 3 irons so that you can make this a little easier for yourself. Instead of using a painting to hide a door, use it to hide a chest, or rather the pressure plate to hide that chest. See, as this user shows, we can place our painting supported onto a pressure plate, which then can serve as the redstone input to open up this piston to reveal our chest. And sure, paintings do tend to look a little suspicious, but I doubt many people are throwing items through them. So while your friends and enemies might wonder why it's there, they probably can't figure out that this is the reason for it. Camouflage skins are nothing new to Minecraft, but what we're camouflaging might be a new touch, since the particular choice here to use a deep slate camouflage skin can work really well with how dark it gets in the lower levels. And then from there, hitting the sneak key will make you even more invisible. And now the big problem you're gonna have to worry about is making yourself look too invisible that your friends think it's safe enough to use a tunnel bore. In that case, you might be better off safe rather than hidden. The actual fastest pickaxe in the game happens to be gold, though that comes with a couple caveats. For one, the difference can be situational, so some blocks will behave the same, while others the gold will mine faster. But more importantly is that this difference changes when the pickaxes are enchanted. Since while it's true that an unenchanted gold pickaxe is better than an unenchanted netherite, when you enchant the both of them with efficiency 5, then the netherite pickaxe actually shines. Oh, and also it has more durability than a toothpick, so maybe that's still worth using. And unless you're a speedrunner trying to clear out netherrack, there's really no point to using this golden pickaxe ever. In 20W22A, there was a glitch where if you logged into your Minecraft world with the clouds turned on, and then turned them back off, and if you do that correctly, the clouds should stop moving on screen. That is, until you move. At which point they'll follow your every movement precisely, which is more than a little creepy. I've heard of the hills having eyes, but I guess the clouds do too. If you go to create a super flat world, and instead choose for every block in the world to be made out of enchanting tables, none of them will generate with books, which by itself is already kind of ruining Minecraft, but we can push it so much further. Since if you then use the fill command or world edit to reset those enchanting tables, then they'll have their books back, and the result will be a lot more headache inducing. Yeah, each of those books wants to take a peek at you, and the result is a lot of lag. Plus it's just creepy too. By throwing down seeds for a villager, regardless of the type, they're gonna walk towards and pick it up. And this blew my mind when I first heard it. I thought it would have only worked with farmer villagers, but sure enough, there is a way to get them to follow the breadcrumb trail. With realistic physics, you can only travel about 10 blocks in a row before the blocks begin to fall, much in the same way that we're used to using scaffolding. And that means that when you try to build a bridge in Minecraft, you're gonna need to actually have those realistic support beams to keep it up. Otherwise, if you do this without, it's not gonna work. Which sure might help to make some of your bridges look better, but if you're someone who likes to speed bridge, especially in something like Bed Wars, I don't think you'll be able to do that anymore. After all, it's not much of a speed bridge if you have to waste time to build supports to do it. So you're probably best to try to use something like an ender pearl to help you clear gaps in the future. Now that everything has gravity, if you try to build a piston door in the usual way, everything's gonna fall apart. And you'll see as much from this basic 2x2 door example. Even if you understand the redstone, it's not gonna make the cut. And you'll find that the only workaround to get this working in your world is that you must have the pistons both open and closed simultaneously. Otherwise, you're just left with a bunch of redstone bits falling through the cracks. And that'll be especially true if you try to build a door any larger than this one. If you thought it was hard here, it's close to impossible with these other options. With just a lever and some redstone dust, we're able to lag the game so much that we can basically freeze time. Since with the way that Mojang's coded redstone dust, it gets pretty laggy when you connect a bunch of these up to a lever. And then by using something like the fast right-click feature in a mod like Tweakaroo, we can flip that same lever on and off until eventually the redstone's updating so much that we basically slowed time down to a crawl. And then that's where the fun begins, since one of the easiest tricks to pull off with this is to break bedrock. Or if you wanted to, you could use this to freeze time on a multiplayer server, build an entire structure, and then when time switches back to normal, your friend will have no idea where that came from. But let me warn that in that case, you don't want to spam the lever for too long, since doing it for longer than 60 seconds might just trigger Minecraft's watchdog to terminate the server. But as long as you freeze time in smaller increments, they'll be none the wiser. Netherite armor is actually deadly, because with realistic weight, wearing armor now makes you even heavier, meaning that the more armor points that you have, the lower that you'll jump. And while that makes it a lot tougher to do parkour, it's still worth keeping your heavy armor sets. And why is that? Well, now if you were to land on enemies, it's possible to do some damage when you land. And the faster that you're falling, the more damage that will do. So the question is, can you kill another player like this? And as you can see, if we start from 42 blocks up, we can land the fall and kill our friend just like an anvil would. Now, when you watch this glitch happen in first person, it might be hard to understand what's happening. But when we cut to a third person view, it gets a little bit more obvious. What's happening here is that the client and the server are desyncing every time we punch this fish. So while the client thinks that nothing changed and we can keep swimming as normal, according to the server, that punching cancels the sprint and we stand up so that we can breathe above the air. And that little bit of desync will keep our head above water. In the snapshots for 1.20, there existed a glitch where if you had a chiseled bookshelf that was already filled with books and then you clicked it with another book that was in your hand, then you could duplicate that book of your choice as much as you wanted to. Which was great if you didn't have yourself a mending villager, which is probably the most useful bookshelves have ever been in the game. And of course, that's why it got patched out. Now, I'm not someone who likes glazed terracotta. I just usually think the pattern's too busy. But with this floor example, I think it looks quite nice. But that has nothing to do with the pattern and everything to do with this illusion. Since once we jump, you're gonna notice that this wasn't just a regular set of blocks, but actually full-size glazed terracotta patterns made to look like the smaller blocks. So then when you stand at the right angle on top of this one, it mixes together nicely with the other examples. And sure, if you really were to study it, you could see some cracks in this illusion, like the fact that we can't match every color of the texture perfectly with actual blocks. But come on, look me in the eyes and tell me with a straight face that this couldn't fool you for just a little bit of a second. If you look at the original sprite file for the items.png that used to be in Minecraft, what you notice is quite a few items that were textured but never added to the game fully. And among those was the quiver, which had its origins in the Legend of the Chambered game that Notch had made prior. And more interestingly is that this wasn't just a forgotten thing, since on the 22nd of January in 2010, the texture was actually flipped to be a mirrored version. So they didn't forget about it, until of course they switched the way that Minecraft worked entirely with the resource pack update, and that meant we lost the quiver. That was until Dinnerbone tweeted out these two screenshots, one showing the quiver being used in survival, and another one showing it in the creative inventory. So it seemed like they even planned to add it in with the new tipped arrows. But again, after 1.9 fully came out, there was no mention of this anymore. But with inventory management being such a big problem for Minecraft, having a different way to hold extra arrows on hand without having to clog up your inventory, I think that's still worth exploring. In the trailer for the Trails and Tales update, we see Steve diving into the water to find some of the new Tide armor trims. But when he dives down, he gets noticeably close to the pufferfish, enough for it to puff up, which if Minecraft's taught us anything, that also means that Steve would get poisoned. No amount of cool looking armor's gonna change that. If you were to fill up your bucket from a water pool, you'll notice that water doesn't just appear out of thin air. Rather, you'll be taking exactly 1 bucket's worth of water out of the pool, and the entire pool will shift down a level because of that, which gives us these interesting sights of half-filled puddles that we can stand in. And important to note that with this, if you're standing in a water source that's 1.5 blocks high, you'll still be able to breathe, because the truth is, your head's not staying outside of the water, which is pretty forgiving. But also with this, you're gonna notice it's a lot more annoying to try and empty your water bucket into an already filled pool. Doing that will just cause the entire thing to flow over, and we'll be back to picking up the mess again. If we break 2 of the leaf blocks on this tree and then place a trapdoor like so, we can use that to crawl inside of the tree. And then, once we're inside of the tree's canopy, we can break that trapdoor and replace it with a leaf block. And then, partnered with how busy the leaf texture is, especially if they're playing with low graphics settings, we can really disappear into this canopy. Or if you don't have a tree yet and still want to do this, then by placing a leaf block in a setup like this with a sapling underneath, you can bone meal the sapling, and as soon as it grows, you'll actually be hidden just where you want to be. And while birch is the easiest tree to pull this off with, you might want to try a few times to actually get a tall oak tree. They're rarer, but they're a lot easier to hide in. One of the oldest rules in Minecraft is that you should never dig straight down, but that old rule is really just old hat. Since when you crunch the numbers like Mumbo Jumbo did, you notice that over 64% of the time that you dig straight down, nothing's gonna happen. You're not gonna fall into lava, you're not gonna fall into a cave and break your legs, just nothing. And if you want to increase those odds to even better better chances of survival, what you could always do is stand in between two blocks like this and then mine down one after the other. So then if you notice that one of the blocks drops down into a ravine or lava, you'll still be standing on the other block. And at that point, if you don't correct your mistake, you deserve to fall into lava. In Snapshot 21W08B, you didn't have to use a budding amethyst to get more of the stuff, but instead, by placing a piston facing upwards with a slime block on top, all we had to do was line all faces of that slime block with a corresponding max amethyst chunk, so that when we activated the piston, it would duplicate all of the shards. Which, if you need a lot of tinted glass, could come in handy. But I can't say the same if you need a lot of spy glasses, because those are barely useful when you have one of them, let alone 65. In the past, we've talked about what's the most damage you can do in Minecraft, and as it turns out, it's using a TNT arrow cannon like this one. But the truth is, folks, we lied to you. That's not the deadliest thing you can do in Minecraft. I know, I was shocked too. But the reality is that if you set up a command block that's always active, running the command, like you'll see on screen in the description below, this means that whenever you shoot an arrow, it'll become the deadliest version an arrow could possibly be. And at that point, forget about critical hits. You're gonna one-shot everything in the game. Just don't one-shot yourself, since if you shoot an arrow up and hit yourself, in certain versions of the game, that can cause it to completely crash. After all, Steve only has 10 hearts, and with how much damage this does, it might as well just delete the word heart from the dictionary entirely. It's that bad. With just one bed and a bell, we can gather all of our villagers like that. And it really is as simple as just placing down the bed in the middle of an area, and then you'll see them all flock towards the bed, giving you all of your villagers wrangled up, which you could then use to either convert them all into witches with a trident, or convert them all into zombies with this method here. Whatever the point is, I'll let you decide. But now at least you'll know how to gather up the rapscallions. And now, anvils aren't the only block to look out for, because with realistic gravity, basically every block can hit like an anvil. And you'll notice that the higher that a block falls from, the more damage that it can deal to us and to mobs. So yes, even if you have yourself a shulker box filled up with 27 stacks of dirt, then that would technically mean that you have 1,728 deadly weapons. Which, when that saves you from having to spend all this iron the other way, it's hard to argue that you're getting quite the bargain. Perhaps surprising no one, flying machines no longer work with realistic gravity. Don't get me wrong, you can build them, but once you attempt to launch it, it's not going to go very far through the air. Which not only means that we can't use these machines for flying anymore, but it'll also break their use case in something like a bamboo farm. And much like our piston doors, this also breaks plenty of different entrances and elevators that we would have built otherwise. So for my money, you should save your time and not try to get the slime balls necessary to build one of these. It's not going to do you very much good. Alright, pop quiz. What do you do after accidentally hitting a zombie piglin? Well, the solution's simpler than you might think, since all we gotta do is take after this user on Reddit and dig out 2 blocks into the ground and then build 2 blocks up so that we're standing safe. And from there, if we hold crouch and move back over the hole, then at that point, all of the zombie piglins are just gonna run into that confined space. And once we got them crammed in there like sardines, all we have to do is drop 2 pieces of gravel on top of them, and they'll all suffocate down there in the pit, making this the simplest way to get off their bad side. Though keep in mind that if you do this, you might run the risk of them spawning zombies as reinforcements. But as long as you're stayed up on their tower, you'll be able to easily dispatch them too, proving that this mistake was as easy to solve as it was to make. You need to shoot yourself in Minecraft with a bow, don't get ahead of yourself. But the reason that you want to do this is because with the right punch bow, if you aim down at your feet just right, you could be able to hit yourself and actually get a surprising amount of momentum going, even moving yourself along faster than sprinting alone. And in a PvP situation, this could be able to help you get out of a pinch much faster, like double jumping over gorges. It's really cool. But in fairness, the amount of damage that you're taking from those few arrow shots is substantially less than you would have been taking from the bad guy right behind you, and also less than you would have taken from falling into that pit, so I feel like both of those are pretty good. If we grab this cobweb, we can take after this user and actually pull off the perfect temple heist. All you have to do is when you mine into the treasure chamber, place this cobweb, and then slowly but surely loot all of the chests before you hit that pressure plate. But hit that pressure plate we never will, because if we throw this ender pearl right before we open the last chest, we can launch ourselves right back out to the surface, leaving both us and the treasure chest intact. In Bedrock Edition, it's possible to waterlog doors, which apparently the code took to mean that there's some leftover water hidden in the door. And you can see as much from this Reddit user's discovery, which is that if you stood at the edge of the corner in Bedrock Edition and flipped the door back and forth, you'd notice that the bubbles would start to appear over your hunger bar, which sure enough meant that we were able to drown ourselves inside of a door with no water in sight, which makes it even more ironic that on Java Edition, we're able to use the doors to stop ourselves from drowning, which honestly, I prefer over the alternative. One of the most recent lies in Minecraft is that the ancient city actually has a giant portal that can be lit. But regardless of how many videos and thumbnails you've seen trying to say otherwise, that's just not the case. But Mojang didn't help himself themselves here, since for a brief time in the files of the snapshot, they actually did refer to this structure as a portal. And at that point, you're just begging for people to theorize about it. So it's not true, but who knows, maybe it was supposed to be. What are the classic Minecraft debates? You got Java versus Bedrock, creative versus survival, and dirt versus sand for planting your sugarcane. But to put all of those to rest, the truth is that the game has actually never checked to see what block the sugarcane's planted on. So whether it's dirt, grass, sand, or even mud, none of those are going to contribute to the sugarcane that you're planting. So pick the best for your aesthetic and leave it there. We're not allowed to sleep in beds in the Nether or the End. That's just intentional game design. But it's intentional game design that I don't think the villagers were made aware of. Since if you get a villager into the Nether through whatever torture means necessary, and eventually get it next to a bed, then sure enough, you can get them to sleep in either of the other dimensions without the bed ever exploding. But you try to kick that same villager out of bed, it's gonna end one of two ways. And if you get your villager over to the other dimension and you notice they're not sleeping, keep in mind they'll follow the overworld time schedule. I guess they're just jet lagged or portal lagged. I'm just glad it's not actual lag. Instead of building a volcano in your next Minecraft world, you should really just build a portal, since that's what user Potato Boy did on Reddit and got the exact same effect. Now, thanks to the Immersive Portals mod, if you set up a portal on the other side of the Nether, then when you glance through the top of our so-called volcano, you'll be glancing straight into the fire and the flames. And with shaders like they're using here, the effect gets even better. And hey, sacrificing people in the Nether is going to be even better at getting the job done than some volcano would. So get ready for a bountiful harvest this year. You ever realize that Minecraft used to feel quite a bit scarier? Well, that's not just your imagination and nostalgia blindness, but part of that could also be features like void fog getting removed in recent updates. Truly, the lower that you got down to the world, when you eventually reach the bedrock floor, you would have this huge dark fog clogging up your vision, which created a really great spooky atmosphere when you were down there branch mining. But in 2014, Mojang removed the void fog, saying that it was supposed to help improve performance. But now that there's a lot more people to help out optimizing Minecraft, and a lot more performance mods even if they don't, I think it'd be nice to see this return in some official capacity, even if it's just an option that you can turn off in accessibility. People often talk about how rare the blue axolotl is, but there actually was one even rarer. And the only place to find the green axolotl variant was in the Caves and Cliffs update for part 1. Now, if you blink, you might miss it, but in fact, there it is. And this green variant was also shown off in early promotional images released for the game. And honestly, I don't know how hard it would have been to add in a green axolotl like this anyway. But it also doesn't look like we're ever gonna learn the answer, since when Lady Agnes was asked this question on stream, this is what she had to say.
I'm not sure I can answer that right now, I'm sorry.
But hey, I guess a non-answer is better than no answer at all. At least I acknowledged it. Despite all the changes to water's physics, we're still able to use a water bucket for a clutch. And now if you just place down the bucket to break your fall, the water isn't going to spread everywhere like it usually would. Which overall is less destructive, and it still looks pretty cool. So I'd still recommend carrying one of these in your hotbar for safekeeping. Powdered snow isn't exactly a comfortable hiding spot. Well, the only thing that's keeping you from jumping face first into a pile of white powder is the law. No, is 4 leather and a crafting table. Since, strangely enough, all it takes is a pair of leather boots to make yourself completely immune to freezing, even when you're completely submerged in powdered snow. And you'll see as much if we sneak behind this armor stand. And then if you keep holding sneak, no one will be any the wiser that you're down there. Did you know mobs can't kill you if you hide in sugarcane? Well, that's not true, but it used to be. Since apparently back before the 1.9 snapshots, there existed an old bug where if you stood inside of a sugarcane stalk like this, the mobs wouldn't try to hunt you down. But unfortunately for us and our sugarcane, that's been changed. Which makes sense, it's one of the more transparent blocks you can stand inside. If the zombies couldn't track you down through that, I would doubt their eyesight. Did you know Mojang made it so creepers can't explode at all? It's really no joke. We're just gonna have to go up to the build limit to test it out. Since in current versions of the game, if you were to get a creeper or an exploding TNT block up at Y level 320, then at that build height, they're not able to destroy any blocks. And the reason for that is that when the game checks to see if the block has the right resistance, it just returns null. After all, you're not supposed to be able to place blocks up here, so why should it explode? And that means all explosion spread is nullified as well. Now, what you see might look like a lot of beehives, but the truth is that it's actually even more bees. Since through the help of commands, we were able to spawn all of these beehives, each of them with 3 bees inside. And as soon as daytime rolls around, you're gonna see all those bees come out to play. And the results are clear to see. Mostly because your computer's only gonna render about 1 frame per second. And honestly, it's hard to say I'm not jealous. Not of the dying computer, but I respect the bees willing to stick that much to their wake-up schedule that they'll literally ruin the world. To make sure our villagers are safe when they're doing our bidding, we have to defend against raids. And the easiest way to do that is to take a pillager mob that might have spawned from a patrol, tuck it into a prison and give it a name tag, so that then, whenever you walk by with the bad omen effect, the raid's never actually gonna start, because it thinks that Larry over here is the only raider that it should be sending. And then then after a few days in-game, the raid will end and your base will be completely fine, all without having to worry about things like evokers or ravagers ever too. And if it means I have to enslave one pillager so that I can keep enslaving my villagers, that's fine by me. With realistic block physics, glass is not as good of a building block. And now if you were to build up a large tower of glass, or even just leave some glass blocks hanging out in the air, as soon as it falls to the ground, they'll shatter on impact. And as you'll notice, the same now happens with leaves too, which I guess in both cases makes sense, but now you'll want to be extra careful that you have a Silk Touch pick ready to harvest these when you can. With this setup, you'll never have to eat again, since the truth is, by just having regeneration on your beacon, starvation's no longer a worry for you, since the fact of the matter is that you'll actually out-heal the starvation damage. Now granted, you won't be able to sprint, but if you want to AFK at a farm without ever having to worry about starving to death, then just setting up a simple beacon like this could really be all you need. And that way we can turn even the deadliest of Minecraft game modes into essentially peaceful mode. When you fly with an Elytra, you're able to fit through a 1x1 space, and a setup like this with multiple rings that get progressively smaller and smaller will prove that, especially if you're flying faster. At that point, it's hard to even tell what a ring is, let alone if you're flying through it. And then if you add in having to turn into the rings, that'll also greatly increase the difficulty. But by increasing the difficulty like that, it does make it a more impressive skill to learn. So if you're looking to show off your Elytra course to your friends next time you're flying through on the server, this is a good way to do it. By using a fishing rod, we're able to grab a falling dripstone entity and then launch it towards our friends, which I'll mention is easy to do, but it's definitely hard to aim to get the kill. And unlike the anvil, we not only have to worry about where the player's position's gonna be, but also the timing of when we reel in the dripstone. And when you're balancing that many things at once, it's pretty tough to pull off. And honestly, our best bet's to do like this user does and try and launch it towards someone who's on a lower pillar. That way they've at least got a stationary position. Is it easy? No, but a little more possible, and that's what I'll take. Did you know you can kill the Ender Dragon with just one end crystal? It's crazy, but follow this out. Since back in 1.17, if you booted up a super flat world, and if you brought an end crystal to the end with you as you went through the portal, and then placed down that same crystal on the obsidian platform that you spawn in, it would just kill the Ender Dragon instantly. Which is weird, I thought those crystals were used for bringing it back to life. But nope, on a super flat world, I guess it just makes it super flatline. In science, perpetual motion machines are just a hypothesis. But in Minecraft, it's as simple as 8 rails placed together like so. Since by building a square of regular rails like this, if you place a minecart on top of the slope, it'll continue to go around and around the loop, never slowing down. And to make things funnier, you put an entity inside, and that just makes the whole thing speed up. Let's take a look at this confusing display. Since from this angle, we just have a dirt block floating in a room, but it gets even weirder when we step to this side. Not only does the wall that should have been here disappear, but now our dirt blocks turn into copper. And then with another rotation, our copper turns into gold, and honestly, I think we have this alchemy thing figured out. Then finally we could walk around to the last remaining wall and see that the gold turned into diamond. And I'll say that if this was a multiple choice test, I think the answer's pretty easy. Or it would have been, but in our case, it ends up being all of the above. Or rather, that you should go above and then go through the roof, since that's where we get the netherite block. Or that sometimes you just need to look at something from a different point of view to end up getting the best return. Did you know that mobs used to be scared of creepers? Sure enough, when there was a creeper that was ready to explode, early versions of the game would see other hostile mobs run away from the creeper, which was a fun little detail. But the way they went about implementing it was a little silly. Since the way that it was coded, each mob would be checking for an exploding creeper near them every single tick, which is a lot of updates to send out. And really, I'm surprised there wasn't a simpler way to do that. Just have the creeper, when it's ready to explode, send a tag out to other nearby hostile mobs in a certain radius, and then they can get scared. That way it's reactive instead of proactive. But apparently it was just easier to remove this entirely, though I would still like to see it return, and hopefully better coded. There must have been some disagreement about how drip leaves work between the trailer team and the actual developers. Since when you watch drip leaves in the trailer, Alex is bouncing off of them, using them to spring from one to the other, but in game, they're not springy, they're quite the opposite. They just droop and fall. But even with that disappointment, the lush caves that she's in still seem a lot better than what Steve's dealing with. This hourglass is completely possible with realistic water physics, because now water will try to drain down from a higher place into a lower one. So once we break this block, the water will seamlessly flow from the top down to the bottom. Man, this is just one of the many cool builds that you could make, since this could also allow for a water mill as well. And give this to the technical community, and I'm sure they'll find out more than a few farms that could use this, making it one of the more helpful uses of realistic water. You might not see the secret entrance, but that's kind of the point. Since if you were to go find yourself a spot inside of a snowy area, dig down into a pit, and then place scaffolding back up to the surface, then even when we cover our tracks with a snow layer on top, we'll still be able to memorize where we go and sneak right into the location. But that's the key part, you gotta remember where you're hiding, because otherwise it might look a little weird if you just keep crouching in a pile of random snow. And the last thing you want is to draw any suspicious eyeballs to your new base. It's best to log the coordinates if you really need to. Apparently, the warden isn't blind, despite what you might think. since when you go into spectator mode and then click on certain mobs, that'll allow you to see the world through their eyes, which lets you see that things like creepers, endermen, and spiders have very different ways of seeing the world. So with that logic, when you click on the warden, you'd expect something different, but in reality, it just sees the world the same as you and me. Which, while that could be an interesting piece of lore, it's more likely than not just an oversight on a seldom used mechanic. I must be a bad trainer, because no matter how many times I try to tame wolves, I can never get them to sit still. Though the reason for that might just be because when you summon a wolf on top of a slime block and then tame it, you can't actually get it to sit down, since the way that the slime block works, it's a little bit less than a full block size. And that confuses the wolf's hitbox so that it sits down and then stands right back up. I can't say I blame them, I also don't want to sit down Nickelodeon gack. We're gonna use just one ender pearl to get infinite amounts of ender pearls, and then 0 amounts of frames. By setting up a repeating command block, we can type in this execute command so that every ender pearl entity that enters the world is therefore summoning other ender pearl entities. Which right now doesn't seem that bad, but as soon as you make the decision, or the mistake I should say, to throw out an ender pearl, we'll quickly have more than 16 of the things. Then after saying this, maybe it's for the best that endermen don't always drop ender pearls. Clearly they're a lot more powerful than we ever thought. Here's how to use one villager to get ourselves infinite emeralds. Since as Razeworks shows off in this video, if we get ourselves a librarian villager and then train it up to being an apprentice, then after a few mishaps with a zombie, we're able to drive its prices so low so that we're able to buy a bookshelf for 1 emerald, and then, here's the key, we can sell a book back for it for an emerald. And obviously, every time that you buy a bookshelf, you break it to get 3 books, and then sell it back for 3 emeralds, meaning 3 more bookshelves, and the cycle repeats. Which is obviously very lucrative, but keep in mind, I'd only suggest doing this on hard mode, since in the other difficulties, it's not a guarantee that you can zombify the villager. And nothing's gonna be worse than putting in all this work just to have your villager die on the spot. Workplace hazard, I guess. And you won't just be needing Soak Touch for your glass blocks, because now if you let any block that needs Soak Touch to mine fall to the ground, it'll either break into its regular non-Soak Touch variant, or just break entirely. And that also means you have to be very particular in how you place your bees' nests, since without the proper support, they could just fall to the ground and break entirely, giving both us and the bees quite the issue. If you're planning to build with copper, you need to have this farm. Since with this design by ENXO4, we're able to make an extremely simple footprint for what's going to be a very profitable farm. And the whole way that this works hinges around these zombie reinforcements. Since under certain conditions, zombies are able to spawn other zombies to help them out in a fight. And what's better yet, these zombie reinforcements ignore the mob cap. Meaning just like that, we're able to pile hundreds and hundreds of zombies into our farm. And at that point, as long as you have a looting 3 and mending sword, we can use an auto clicker to stay at this farm for hours. And at that point, the only question's going to be, how do you store all that copper? Normally we use an MLG water bucket to save ourselves from a high fall, but what about a low fall? Or rather to say, the lowest possible distance that you can fall underneath the world. Since if you were to set up shulkers and boats in the void, we can't actually make a platform that's 67 blocks underneath the world's surface. And then if we were to fall from world height, that would be a 447 block drop, which is going to take a while to fall. So remember that once you get close to the bottom, you are supposed to press right click to get yourself into one of those boats. After all, it'll be pretty embarrassing to set all this up and then die in a place where it's almost impossible to get your stuff back. Maybe do a little bit of practice before you try this one. To pull off the impossible feat of speed bridging with gravity blocks, we're gonna need a lot of lag, and probably a macro too. In this example, we're using the carpet mod to simulate lag in the map, and you'll notice that the better that you are at bridging, overall the less lag that you'll need. And really to pull off this trick without using any lag, you would have to move at a speed faster than what's possible in survival mode, which is impressive for sure, but it kinda defeats the point. As user T-Pupper showed off on Reddit, back in the snapshot of 19W42A, there was a glitch where if you planted a tree on a dirt block, and then had another dirt block at any height above that tree sapling, then when you bone mealed the tree, it would grow on the block above instead. And folks, there was no limit to the amount of gap that we could have here, getting some really peculiar sights if you decided to plant your tree on the bottom level of the floor. You'd get that tree, but it would be up in the mountains. Now, if only you had some wood to make some ladders to reach the tree, then you'd be solved. At its highest level, Swift Sneak 3 is supposed to help you walk around while sneaking about as fast as you would when you're regularly walking. And on almost every block in the game, that's true, except for slime blocks. Since here, for walking, we might move at a pace at about 1.3 blocks per second. But when we then hold down the sneak key, we're moving at 2.2 blocks per second. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still not fast, but it seems odd to speed up the further you're sinking down into the sticky stuff. But as this user on Reddit says, there's really no reason to delete it. And even though I don't get it, I'm inclined to agree. As we've shown off already, the Immersive Portals mod offers the ability to change large scenes into 1x1 frames, which means they can essentially take a large landscape and have it appear as a small diorama, which which is how we're able to get this whole mess. Where you can see this village house placed on the trapdoor like so, but then when we flip open this trapdoor, we can climb into that very same house, even appearing as if we're rendering sideways on that diorama when we placed it. And after looking at this, I might be losing my grip on reality too. Before the so-called flattening, there are ways to give yourself special six-sided blocks through give commands in Minecraft. And while some of these have been added in official capacity, such as the six-sided logs or the smooth stone block, I think it'd be great to see something like the six-sided piston return as an official capacity. Maybe it's a crate block. Or if you want to add in extra redstone functionality, you could use this as a way to extend the piston push limit past 12 blocks. I don't know, I just think it would be cool to see these features that were historic in some Minecraft players' journey return officially, especially if they've already picked a few of them to do this with. In the announcement trailer for the Minecraft livestream in 2022, you'll notice that in this example, there's multiple frogs that are able to ride in one minecart, which not only doesn't happen with any mob in the base game, but here we're also able to see the frogs. Since in reality, if you get a frog inside of a minecart, the only way you're going to be able to see it is from above. They're just too small within the minecart's model. Oh, and also, they got a warden inside of a minecart too. Don't think I didn't miss that. Be careful not to dig from a river down into a cave, since with the way that water works now, that'll eventually cause the cave to fill up with water. And worse still, that could also end up draining your river, which would give you more than a few problems, both above ground and below it. And while this could technically happen with the ocean too, unless the cave's very big, you're really not going to see much of a dent. But all of that to say, be careful, because I don't think placing a few doors to get an air bubble is going to help you this time. If you only need to hide yourself for a few minutes, then it's hard to beat a lava pool. Since with a fire resistance potion and some redstone, we can buy ourselves some valuable time to hang out at the bottom of a lava lake. And there, even if anyone notices that you're down there, it's not like you'll be easy to get to. But I will warn obviously that if you try this, you might want to have a stopwatch next to you, or at the very least another potion so that you can re-up it. After all, the brewing stand makes 3 of them, so you could use all of that to get yourself 24 minutes at the bottom of a lava lake. And at that point, if they're still waiting up there to catch you, they deserve to. They clearly have patience. When you take a strider outside of lava, it's supposed to get cold. But when you put them in powdered snow, then they get warm again. At least that's how it happens on Bedrock. Which, even trying to think of a lore reason for why this happens now, none come to mind. They drop string, not leather, so there's no way they're safe from this. It's just a bug. If you've ever overpopulated your farm, you're aware that Minecraft has something called the entity cramming limit, which is that if you have more than 24 mobs in a specific space, then if you add one more, the game won't allow it. It'll just apply constant damage until you die, which is great for traps, but not as great for breaking Minecraft. And while you can change this with a game rule, you can also break this limit in survival. All you have to do is just place down a vine, since by just using any climbable ladder in the space of the block, we can get a stupid amount of mobs into this one spot. And if you really want to give your PC a jump scare, all you have to do after this is break one of the blocks and close in the hole, and then all of those mobs will spill out and prove that maybe it's for the best that this limit's in place. All it takes is one drowned mob to speed that right up. Since this user on Reddit shows, if we were to get a drowned mob with a trident into this system, throw the trident at us, and that trident will catch on fire, which we can then use to ignite a piece in TNT, and that'll cause all of these villagers down here to die on the spot, and coincidentally, all turn into zombies. And while we've shown off in the past using the similar version of this to make a record farm, I think this design ends up being a lot more practical, but also a lot more cruel, so maybe check your morals at the door. What's the rarest enchanted piece of armor that you can find? Well, it's easy to talk about the enchanted pieces of armor that we were able to get for one update in 1.14, where those had every single protection type on top of them. There's actually one step rarer that we can go. See, in Bedrock Edition, it's possible that if you go into the secret room of a woodland mansion, you can find a leather helmet enchanted with efficiency 1, making it the rarest enchanted helmet that you can find in the game, in either version. But it's funny, it's enchanted with efficiency, and yet I'm in no rush to put it on my head. You can't even put it in an item frame to have it be impressive. It would just look like a regular enchanted leather helmet, and that's not really why we're interested in this. I guess just put it in a chest if you find it. Let's say you start in a new world and you need an XP farm. Well, we're gonna hop over to the Nether, and not for blazes or anything like that, but rather to farm nether quartz. Since by just breaking one of these nether quartz ore, you're about guaranteed 3.5 experience points on average, meaning that if you just broke nether quartz ore alone, it would only take breaking 400 of these to get you from level 0 to 30. And with how prevalent and dense these veins can be, that's gonna be pretty easy to get. And plus, nether quartz has other uses too. I see this as a win-win. Minecraft has boats, but it doesn't have planes. At least, not yet. We're now capable of putting those 5 wooden planks into better use in the sky. First, you want to get into third-person mode with F5. And then at that point, if you get in and out of the boat repeatedly while you're falling, you're able to slow down its velocity to a snail's pace. And the reason this works is that every time you get out of the boat, it cancels its current velocity. But what's even better is that you don't just have to use this for falling slow, you can also use it for moving a wider horizontal distance. And that's why you'll see speedrunners putting this to use if they need to save themselves on a run. Or in Dream's case, you can use it to save yourself when you're running away from your friends. Once you get a rainstorm overhead, ahead, if you equip yourself with a Riptide 3 Trident and Elytra, we're able to pull off the coolest trick shot in history. But watch closely, because if you blink, you might miss it. Since once we get a rainstorm overhead, we're able to use this setup to get ourselves launching at over 400 blocks per second. And at that point, it's difficult to land anything, let alone a headshot. But once you do, you'll notice that this is able to one-shot someone with Protection 4 Netherite armor. And in our testing, we found that if they're wearing Projectile Protection 4, this will still get them down to 1 heart. Who knows, with more precise timings, there's still a chance that we could get this in one shot. And that way, we basically turn ourselves into a flying version of the rail cannon. There's a lot of debates over whether birch logs are ugly, and while I don't want to weigh in on those, I will say that Snapshot 20W28A didn't do you any favors. Since back then, there was a very weird bug when it came to birch trees, where when you'd load up your world, the birch trees would spawn in a square formation in every birch forest, creating this really unnatural sight. And I get that Minecraft's a game made out of squares and cubes, but this might just be pushing it too far. This might look like a 3D model that we green screened onto this background, but it's actually made entirely out of particles, and a convenient program. Since as this post from the Minecraft Commands subreddit shows, we're able to use an external script to then take an animation from Blender and then translate every vertex and its position and color data into a string of particle commands. Finally giving you that Minecraft GF that we've all been hoping for. And while in the past we've shown off this hologram making machine over here, I could say that even while I was looking at that, I never imagined something as animated as this. That's entirely special. By looking into this hole, we've got ourselves a perfect cow spying machine. And best yet, the cow's none the wiser. And the way that we make this happen is having an immersive portal tied up together with a repeating command block so that it's constantly teleporting our portal directly over an entity that we want to watch. And the original poster on Reddit has an even more helpful set of rules that you can see here on screen. Make the portal, name it with the command, and then with a repeating always active command block, you have it constantly teleport the portal entity above whatever entity that you want it to follow, giving us the perfect crystal ball to spy on your friends or your enemies. I won't judge. Creative mode's supposed to let you do anything in Minecraft, but even then, there's still been some features that we've lost along the years. One of which was the ability to have nether and end portal blocks inside of your inventory in creative mode. I mean, you're able to do a set block command and summon in a nether portal like this without the actual portal frame, so why are we not then allowed to place down that same block if we had it in our inventory? And to make matters even funnier, through the use of a glitch like this that we've shown off in the past, in Bedrock Edition, you're actually able to get a portal block as an item in survival. And that seems a lot more broken than this fix that they added then. So I think at least seeing it come back to creative would be a nice middle ground. This brief moment in a Minecraft trailer is still burned into some players' memory. And the reason for that is this bit of blue dust in the background. And with just those few frames, players went wild with theorizing. Maybe it was some blue alternative to redstone, or a new thing like cobalt. But more likely is that it could have been some unused form of the blue dye, since in this update there was a lot of changes made to the dyes that we had. And key among those is making lapis lazuli no longer used for blue dye, but rather you have to craft it into a separate item. And given the fact that it's the cleric throwing it out and they're used to using lapis, that seems more likely in my head. Cobblestone generators no longer work, because while it's still true that when water and lava meet, you get a cobblestone block, the sad truth is that every time this happens, the level of the liquid lowers each time, which means that unfortunately, a generator can only make about 4 pieces of cobble before you need to refill it. And for those of you on Skyblock, that would make this challenge basically impossible, since we'd no longer have a constant way to get cobblestone. But I guess it's not all that surprising, right? Infinite cobblestone definitely isn't realistic, so it makes sense it doesn't work anymore. Water isn't the only one that got realistic physics, since now, nether lava will also see the same thing. And the first thing you'll notice when you go through the nether portal is that lava no longer permanently falls from the ceiling, but instead, it'll spawn up there, then flow down and either join the lava pools, or just become a sad little puddle to avoid while you're walking around the netherrack. Which, say what you will, this makes it a lot safer to use on Elytra in the nether, and I'll gladly take not having to bob and weave just so I can make it over to the fortress. If you're trying to hide from your friends, then a silly way to do it might just be getting yourself a carved pumpkin. Now, not to say that your friends are Endermen, but what you might see is that if we actually put on one of these and then crouch next to a pumpkin patch, without our name tag, we do tend to blend in with the other textures. Is it stupid? Of course, but if it works situationally, that's good enough for me. Because remember, it only has to work once for it to be worth it. And if everything goes wrong and they still catch you, you could always craft up yourself an iron golem. Lord knows you'll have the pumpkin. Here's how to use a bundle to duplicate all your diamonds. All you gotta do is lay out 9 diamonds on the crafting table to craft a diamond block, and then use the bundle to pick up the individual items in the crafting table. At that point, we still have our 9 diamonds in our inventory, but but the diamond block will remain in the crafting table. And now we went from 9 diamonds to 18, giving you a short track to the new richest person on the server. I would just suggest moving. I don't think the IRS takes kindly to diamond duping. Trading with villagers is great till they start to lock away those traits. We're actually able to solve that through the help of portals. Now in current versions, this only works with end gateway portals, but building a design like this, it's possible to start a trade with the villager, and then once we get pushed through the end gateway, we'll still be trading with that same villager, meaning we could do our trades and it won't even lock. And from there, we're able to max out as much trading as we want to do without ever having the villager actually cut us off, since when we go back through the portal, it'll be like nothing ever happened. In 1.20, armor looks pretty different, and that's not because we got a new armor type, but rather new types of our armor. Since with the addition of armor trims, we now have 16 varieties that we can use to deck out our armor. You're just gonna have to work for it, because they can only be got from randomly generated loot within their respective structures. And while it's expensive enough to add these to your armor, costing 1 material for each trim that you want to add, they're even more expensive to get more of them, costing 7 diamonds per armor trim that you want to duplicate. So I'd recommend testing out which one you want to try in creative mode, because figuring it out in survival is just way too much opportunity cost. And with the help of command blocks, some clever players have found out how to turn these armor trims into full RGB armor. And now your player can match everything else in your house. It might not look it, but this redstone is entirely wireless. And you'll see as much when we flip this lever. This design by 2No2Name has an infinite range, just as long as you're in the same dimension. The way this works is based off an obscure item mechanic where the game will store a unique entity ID, and then the delay it takes for that hopper to pick up the item could differ depending on that ID. And so when our receiver checks for that specifically timed entity creation, that'll sync up with our transmitter and allow us to have virtually infinite range on our redstone. But keep in mind, this isn't super reliable in single player. It's mostly intended for server use. But when you got it there, it essentially gives us 5G to use in our world. And that just blows my mind. In Bedrock Edition, there's a technique called downfalling. The idea specifically here is that you're going to throw an ender pearl and then attempt to pillar downwards to save yourself. So you would start on a platform, jump off, and then throw an ender pearl at the underside of the platform. At that point, you quickly swap over to blocks, and then try to spam down as many of them as you can to make the pillar. Once you do that, you can ender pearl glitch into the pillar, or place a block off to the side of the pillar to land on it. And while the steps to do it sound like a lot when you sound them all out, when you watch this happen in real time, it actually goes pretty fast. So if you plan on learning it, maybe break it down a little bit before you do. You turn exactly 45 degrees midair, that'll allow you to move around 2% faster. Sounds small, right? But in examples like this, that could be all you need to make the jump. Since while a normal walking speed would be 4.317 blocks per second, when you're strafe walking, that goes up to 4.405 blocks per second. And just by that small margin, we're able to make this jump that we couldn't otherwise. And to even try this, first you're gonna need to jump, sprint, and hold forward at the exact same time. And then you'll hold that right up until the last jump, where you then only have a short amount of time to start strafing back and forth. But that alone isn't enough, since to really pull this off, you have to look as close to 45 degrees to the side as possible. And when you put all that together, you get the hardest jump that we've been able to do in this video. Sometimes the past is very different from how you remember it, but even factoring the Mandela effect, I swear that Minecraft 1.9 never looked like this when I played it. And unfortunately, now when you go to boot up Minecraft 1.9 in the standard Minecraft launcher, you'll instead be greeted to the sight of everything looking completely broken. The text in the chat will be off, textures look weird, parts of the world are just missing, but luckily when you play this version through other third-party launchers, those tend to fare a little better. This isn't Steve, but rather, it's the old human mob that used to exist in Minecraft. And folks, used to is an understatement. This was in the game a long time ago, which means that it also got removed pretty early on to the game's development. And while I'm not saying that we should have to encounter these in survival, I do think that having one of these accessible through creative commands could be a really nice way to open up map makers to some new possibilities. What I'm saying is that I've played way too many custom maps that use armor stands for basically the same thing. So if we could instead use NPCs that actually look like players, I think that would be a welcome change. But if you bring them back, also make sure that they move around less janky, because if they look like this, I'd rather stick to the static statues. See this creeper? Well, if you can't, that's kind of the point. Since now, creepers have the scary ability to blend into their environment, making them much scarier to come across in the caves. And folks, there isn't just a few blocks that they can turn into. The amount of compatibility that this adds in is shocking to say the least, even giving them the ability to blend in with leaves, cobwebs, and glass. And that last one's the scariest, let me tell you that. But given the fact that creepers used to blend in with the alpha grass texture, who knows, maybe this is more intentional. And to me, that's even scarier. Pistons no longer break water, but rather, they're able to push it. And you can see as much from this simple simple example. You pull the lever and the water displaces out of the hole, which, simple as that seems, can make huge differences for the way that we do redstone. And now we're able to move water in and out of a specific area and even push our items in that direction. Meaning item streams might still be possible, you're just gonna need a few pistons to do it. Interestingly, this trailer feature used to not work, but now it's actually possible in new versions. Since when 1.14 was shown off, you wouldn't have a baby villager riding a pig. Now with the /ride command, we're not only able to make that happen, but we can have a whole number of mobs right on top of each other. And the results get pretty crazy. It's worth playing around with. Unlike in real life, in Minecraft, you're not safe under the covers. You're quite literally out in the open. But by opening up this trapdoor underneath my bed, that'll give us access to the secret minecart underneath. And then by having that minecart placed on top of an activator rail, we have a quick and easy way to get in and out of our secret base. And this works particularly well, especially because if you have a bed up top, it already looks like you have a base. And I doubt very many people are going to be checking underneath your beds for any kind of monsters. And then when you're ready to leave, use the same minecart and it'll shoot us right up top. Alright, pop quiz, how do you spawn a wither if there's realistic gravity? Because if you build the shape like you're used to, it's all just gonna fall apart. And that doesn't make for much of a wither, it really just makes a mess. But that's fine because there is a way to still solve this. And now, the only way to spawn the wither is to place this T shape of blocks sideways. But if you're used to spawning withers underneath the bedrock portal in the end, this is nothing new. And honestly, as long as we can still use this easy strategy, that's no skin off my back. I much prefer this anyway. You might be wondering how you even explore ancient cities without having to worry about you-know-who. Well, Illumango's got you covered. Since with this machine, if we just shoot 6 arrows onto the wool block at the bottom of the arrow chamber, then we can close it back up and flip this on and off switch on the hopper clock, which all comes together to mean that we're completely disabling warden spawning. So even though you might hear warden sounds coming from this machine, the actual truth is those are the sounds of failed warden spawn attempts, since when you look around, you're not gonna see any. And not only will this work in the ancient city that you built it within, but because of the built-in chunk loading, we guarantee that this works in any ancient city that you step into in the world, just as long as you're the player that shot the arrows into the machine. And at that point, we can use our hoe to get rid of all the skulk shriekers, so that even when this machine isn't working, we're still not gonna have to worry about the warden. What doesn't make sense is that when you sneak down on the magma blocks, then you don't take any damage. And I've heard a reasoning that when you're holding sneak, you're supposed to be walking more carefully on the stones of the magma. That's all well and good, but what's even more confusing is that when you go underneath a slab like this, visually, it still looks like you're crouching down, but if you're not holding that sneak key, the game thinks you're not, and it'll just apply damage the same. Now, the whole point of the Village and Pillage trailer is that the villagers are dancing when they're getting raided, which obviously doesn't happen in the game, at least not with the villagers. Because more peculiar is that the pillagers are actually the one dancing when they finish a raid. Then the piglins also have a chance of dancing when they finish a hoglin hunt, which begs the question, why were those added in, but when the villagers celebrate you as the hero of the village, the most they do is throw off a couple of fireworks. Seems like a missed opportunity to me. If you've ever watched a speedrun and you see the speedrunner change their FOV like this, it's actually for good reason. Since when you look at the F3 debug screen, you can actually see spikes in entities depending on what your field of view is. So by narrowing your vision down to a low FOV, we can pinpoint where there might be large spikes of entities. And when you're in the nether, this could be a good indication of a bastion remnant being in that direction, since usually piglins, piglin brutes, and hoglins will all spawn upon generation in bastion remnants. And they won't despawn naturally, meaning that when you look in the direction of one, you're going to see more mobs spiking up in your F3 debug than in the surrounding areas. And it's not just good for finding things in the nether, since if you get really specific with the pie chart that you're looking at, you could actually use this to find specific rooms within the stronghold. And honestly, I think it's a skill at all to be able to play the game for a second at low FOV. It just looks hideous. But to then be able to use it to basically look through walls and find things, that's pretty cool. And it could help you out as soon as you learn it. Are you familiar with the law of the conservation of matter? I think I am. I dropped out of high school. But to my understanding, you can't create matter where there wasn't already matter already. So in that case, it scarcely makes sense that when you kill a snowman, which would take 2 snow blocks to make, costing 8 snowballs, they can drop up to 15 snowballs on death, giving you 3 snow blocks. It just seems weird, though I guess we are able to constantly mine the snow layers that generated their feet for snowballs anyway, so it's logic that might be consistent to the snow golems, but not to regular logic of science. Minecraft's textures have changed a lot over the years, but one of the most noticeable is when you look at the old wool colors. Now, while the dyes that we use on these pieces of wool haven't changed as much, we have had 3 different variations to how our wool blocks look. They looked like this before 1.4.2, this before 1.12, and how they look today. And while I get making the change to the other textures, I do think that some of these colors should still have their chance to shine. And who knows, maybe if we had a feature much like how we dye our leather armor, that would be a good middle ground to add these back in. That way, we still keep the colors that we're used to, and we gain the colors that only some of us are used to. 1.19 added in waterlogged leaves, and thanks to realistic water, they're basically removed. Since now if you were to pour water next to your leaves, it'll just flow through the cracks until it reaches the bottom of the tree. And while it is satisfying to watch it all flow through, it means that you can no longer use waterlogged leaves as an exchange for obsidian in your blast chamber. And to me, that might just be the biggest loss yet. But if you're a builder, you could use this as a cool way to build yourself something like a fountain. So it's a loss for function, but it might be a win for form. Back in the beta versions of Minecraft, there used to be a second kind of Enderman. And not just with the green eyes they originally had, but rather it was possible to find an Enderman who was completely white. And the reason that this happened is that in older versions, if an Enderman spawned around the lowest Y levels in the world, then the void fog that generated down there messed up textures. And so when the Minecraft code tries to correct this, it messes up so that the white color is completely permanent, giving us an albino Enderman. Something tells me getting a white grass block from a white Enderman, that'd be something entirely special. In order to get to our secret base, you might want to turn on chunk borders, because when you're flying over the end void, it can be tough to tell which way you're flying, whether that's up or down, and you definitely don't want it to be down. But once we follow this lodestone compass, that'll take us right to our secret base, out in basically the middle of nowhere, because very rarely do people check between the main island and the outer islands of the end. Really, if you don't get there with a gateway or a portal, most people don't explore that part of the end, which means that if you have the time to set it up, this could be the perfect location for your hideout. Just make sure that you fully stock that hideout with plenty of rockets to get back with your elytra. Otherwise, you might be stuck in secrecy for quite a while, unless you want to take the short way out. The Farlands is one of the most famous bugs in history. Or I should say glitch. I guess the most famous bug would be like a bee or a mosquito or something. But for how short of a time this was in the game, it's amazing how much of an impact it leaves on players, even to this day. And so, while it's not possible to have the Farlands in your recent world, you can go out 30 million blocks and be greeted with nothing, I think the opportunity of having Farlands added in intentionally would be a great thing for us to see, even if it was just a world type that you could choose. That way, you don't confuse new players who happen to stumble upon this in their survival world. And it would let a lot of fans experience the Farlands for themselves, instead of having to watch a YouTube video to get the experience. As you can see, when a ghast shoots a fireball at Steve and Alex while they're in the nether, it doesn't just shoot the fireball, but it also recoils back from the action of shooting it, which in the actual game has never happened. And that just goes to show you Minecraft's lackluster representation of physics, since by having no recoil, this disobeys Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there should be an equal and opposite reaction. But obviously, ghasts have never been in the real world either. Maybe this is just how they work. Here's how to survive the void in survival mode. Since unlike in Java, if you play in Bedrock Edition, there's actually an invisible floor that exists right on top of the void. So if you were to give yourself plenty of enchanted golden apples and ways to stay alive, then when you drop down onto the void, you can actually still walk along the floor. Not that it's an enjoyable stroll, but it's better than dying outright. Boats and lava don't mix. So why does this one not burn? Well, since boats are entities, we can summon them in with a command like this. And then by putting in vulnerable in the tags here for the NBT data, that boat just isn't gonna die. And you'll see as much when we get out into the lava. It doesn't even sink down into the fluid. We're able to just skate across, no worries. Which might be even cooler than using boats to jump across the lava like this. Though if you want to switch to survival and try this out, I will mention that you need fire resistance. The way that your hitbox is, you dip a little bit too low into the lava, and unfortunately, even though the boat's invulnerable, it doesn't mean that you are. So apply some magma cream before you try this. Here's how to turn your Strider into a ride or die. Since back in Snapshot 20W13A, there was a glitch that was added in where if you jumped on a Strider and then had a fungus on a stick to guide yourself, then once you angled yourself against these blocks, that would actually allow you to travel 10 times faster than you normally would. Even the Strider looks confused, and I can't say I blame it. Luckily, the Nether doesn't have any speed limits that I know of, but even if it did, you'd be moving so fast, you'd be able to avoid those laws anyway. This might look like a fall to certain death, and really, it will be, unless you're able to land in the 1 pixel worth of water coming from this waterlogged chest. And the reason it's exactly 1 pixel is that chests are exactly 1 pixel smaller than a block on all sides. And if you really want to make this trick seem even more impressive visually, then you can let the water flow as far as possible into the chest corner so that it's also as thin as it possibly could be. At this point, I just think it's funny that this near microscopic amount of water is able to break our fall. Well, something like a cauldron's never been able to. And honestly, if it gives me another opportunity to call out the cauldron for being a bad block, that's a worthwhile skill in its own right. Now when you go to the Nether, you'll notice that things start to fall apart fast. Quite literally. Since even though the netherrack won't fall on us by default, the same can't be said for the blocks that you find in different biomes. And all of a sudden, that makes things like the soul sand valleys, the warped forests, and even the basalt deltas into real treacherous places to explore. And believe me, if the risk of being squashed by a falling block wasn't enough, the amount of lag that this causes could allow you to make other mistakes as well. And really, you're just switching out one pain point for another. I'd say just get your blaze rods and never come back. And while a world made out of enchanted tables is bad enough, one made out of drip leaves gets even crazier. Now, while we could make this only 1 block thick, the better results that you'll see here are made from thicker and thicker layers of drip leaf. since as soon as we spawn in and step on our first victim, that block update will cause the drip leaf underneath us to realize that it's not staying on a supporting block. And so, it pops off as an item. And then this happens again to the next drip leaf, and then again to a few more drip leaf, until eventually we create a ripple of destruction throughout our world. It's like the opposite of watching grass grow on a field of dirt blocks. Instead, you're watching a bunch of drip leaves learn their dirty secret. None of this is real, we live in a simulation. Wake up, wake up, wake up. For a brief time in Minecraft, the deadliest mob in the game happened to be a falling block. Yeah, doesn't look too intimidating here, but back in Snapshot 18W31A, there was a peculiar bug where if you dropped a falling block on top of a mob, for some reason that would cause the mob to sink into the ground. And unfortunately, we weren't any safer, since if a player was squashed by a falling block, you would just fall through every other block in the world, including bedrock, and then die in the void. The only ones who are safe are shulkers, and maybe that means their shells are better for armor than we thought. If you get in a boat and ride it off a cliff, you won't take any fall damage. That's not the weird part. The weird part is that if you take a boat and ride it off of specifically a 49 block tall fall, then you'll die of fall damage, and the boat breaks too. Now, that'd be okay if 49 blocks is the limit, but the fact that you're able to fall from over 50 blocks tall and still survive, then I don't get what's so special about block number 49. Or when you fall from a 114 block fall, then both you and the boat survive, but then when you get out, the boat will still break. And again, that's only block 114. Nah, who knows? Minecraft villages today look very different from how they have in the past. And while a lot of those changes have been pretty good improvements, I do think it's weird that gravel roads were taken out entirely from villages. Now, don't get me wrong, in some cases, the path block can fit just fine, but in a desert or a snowy biome, not as much. And really, I think bringing back the gravel roads for cases like this would just make more sense, and it would help to give a little bit more variety to how these generate. Which, with how much more often villages generate since 1.14, it'd be nice to have a little variation so they don't get old as fast. Here's why the hanging sign might be one of the deadliest blocks added in Minecraft. No, I'm being serious. If you boot up Bedrock Edition and place a hanging sign like this, then by throwing a channeling enchanted trident into it in the right angle, you'll see that the trident gets stuck, but it's not deadly. At least, you think it isn't. That is until you have an entity actually walk underneath it. At that point, the trident thinks it's supposed to spawn some lightning, and any mob that comes close enough to it will be struck by lightning many times a second. And then what your friend thought was just a simple store selling tridents quickly turns into a funeral home. Their funeral home. In the trailer for 1.15, you can see an iron golem holding out a poppy to a villager, which will still happen, but the only thing is that the villagers never seem to care about it anymore. Because with all the buggy changes they're added in 1.14, one of those is that the villagers will never take the poppy when it's given to them. And apparently Mojang didn't get the memo that they broke this in the last update, since even after it stopped working in 1.14, it made it into this trailer for 1.15. TNT duplication machines are great, but getting slime blocks and coral early on is a real tough business. So instead, we can take after this user's design and make an easy early game cobble farm. Since by supplementing our build with a lot more observers, we're able to glitch out the TNT just the same and essentially duplicate it for all our uses. And then with enough cobblestone generators packed into the inside of the blast chamber, this is a fully automatic way to get loads of cobblestone, which will be handy because as soon as you do get a Silk Touch pick, you're really not going to get a lot more cobblestone from that point. So better to stock up while you can. The Morph mod is one of the most popular Minecraft mods in history, and for good reason. Shapeshifting's fun, and Mojang must have known that, since they added in the potion of the entity in Snapshot 23W13A or B. Yeah, that's literally the name of it. It's an April Fool's joke. Just stick with me. And while I think adding back in this potion and survival would be too much, just having the ability with commands to turn yourself into any other mob, that would be great for vanilla, and particularly great for all the channels that do 100 days of living as a mob. Though if you do that, please just don't add in the buff versions of those mobs. Those should only exist in YouTube thumbnails. If we zoom in and look closely, sure enough, none of the skeletons walking towards Steve actually have any bows and arrows here, or any weapons. They're really more walking like zombies, which is made even weirder by the fact that earlier in the trailer, they show skeletons coming out of the sand dunes, and those skeletons have their bows and arrows, but they still got the spider climbing wrong, so some things never change. This isn't an armor stand, or rather, it's me, because by putting on the same set of armor and then drinking an invisibility potion, we can do something of a mannequin prank and hide in plain sight. And while this will definitely fool someone at a glance, the key thing to note is that interestingly, the player's shorter than the armor stand, even if you equip with the same armor. So I definitely wouldn't want to hide next to other armor stands when you do this. Those static statues could be a dead giveaway. And if you're worried about the potion particles that are coming off of your body, then I mentioned that it helps to do one of these next to an area with beacon beams. Since then, the players are already used to potion particles coming off of themselves, it's not going to strike them as abnormal. Did you know that chests used to be a full block in size? Which not only looks weird to see today, but it also meant that we could place things like redstone and torches on top of the chests. And having the ability to do that in recent versions would be a really welcome change for redstone. And while barrels do serve as a middle ground for this, let's face it, you also can't use those for double chests. The only time you hear of a double barrel's on a shotgun. So being able to mix all of this storage with all of this functionality from the past, I think that'd be fun to explore. If you're able to fill up a shulker box full to the brim of netherite, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself. And if you're able to fill up a double chest full of shulker boxes just like that, then come on, you're on top of the world. Until, of course, you break that chest and it's over lava. Because at that point, even if our netherite doesn't burn, the shulker boxes sure do. And since each of these double chests is able to hold 93,312 items, that means that with the way that Minecraft creates item entities, that's 1,458 stacks of items that you gotta worry about in your world. Which, I know it's all netherite and that should be a good thing, but when your computer's about to put you back in the Stone Age, you won't be too thankful for your luck with ancient debris. It's really just gonna be a hot mess. And much the same way as the Wither, we can now only spawn our iron golems sideways too. Since if you were to try to place blocks underneath their arms to support them, that doesn't work, it just disables the spawning of the golem. But if you lay it flat on its back, the golem will spawn just right. And honestly, it's safer to place the pumpkin on the ground anyway, since they're a lot more fragile as they come. So far, nothing seems wrong about this world. Maybe a little boring, but nothing hold against it. But yeah, don't look up. Since with the help of commands, we're able to set up a sheet of anvils that's gonna drop down at us at any second. And while they're falling down to the ground, those anvils count as entities, which for one is gonna give you a lot of lag. And then that'll get even worse as soon as those anvils start to hit other mobs underneath them. All of a sudden, you not only got a lot of anvil entities, but you've also got a lot of item drop entities being caused by the mobs getting killed. Oh, not to mention the sound too. You might want to unplug your headphones before you try this in your world. Or really, just unplug your whole PC. It'll have the same effect as this does. In the final shot of the Minecraft 1.20 trailer, when Steve's running into the cave, we see a few anomalies on the wall here. Unfortunately, without the use of mods, the spiders cannot climb horizontally. With this simple little piston contraption, we're able to completely break Minecraft logic. Now, when the sticky piston retracts, it doesn't properly update the block that's on top of it, or the one that you attach to the piston's arm. And the reason for that is because the piston doesn't actually think it's supposed to work, since the obsidian's keeping the slime blocks from being able to move. And as such, the slime blocks aren't the only one that doesn't move, and we can get all of these illegal blocks that you see here, giving us one of the simplest ways to do update suppression, and one that still works in modern versions, might I add. Finding an end city's tough, but this will make you feel lucky if you never see one again, since by using the /place command to place down an end city structure, well, sure enough, get an end city. But we don't have to just type in that command once, and we don't even have to be the one to type in the command. And at that point, if you have a command block doing this over and over again, each of these random end city structures is going to overlap with itself. And at that point, the results get pretty ridiculous. It almost looks like the moon base that Mojang had us build in the last April Fools. I wonder if that's where they got the inspiration for it. For a brief time, Mojang added in the pickaxe block to Minecraft. And I mean really brief, it was an April Fool's joke. But while it might have been added in as a gag in the vote update, the idea behind this feature might still hold some water. And being able to use a redstone block that could actually break blocks in front of it, that'd be something that the community's wanted for years. And the same also goes for its counterpart with the placing block, which if the pickaxe block was a left-click function, this one functioned as the right-click. And while they probably need to be rebalanced so that they weren't so crazy, I think that if Mojang ever decides to get rid of TNT duplication, throwing both of these in could be a way to ease the blow. Minecraft jukeboxes have always been a redstone item, but they've never always played well with redstone. And up until recently, it was completely impossible to use things like dispensers to put music discs in, and hoppers to take music disc out. But as of 1.19.4, finally this implementation's added to our jukeboxes, letting us loop the music over and over again, or until you get copyright striked. Yeah, sorry about that one. Although elytras are great for transportation, they're obviously not much when it comes to protection. But ever since 1.19.4, that's been a little bit more easy to bear with, since now you can swap the equipped gear that you have in your hotbar just by right-clicking them with your hand. So in an instant, you could switch from your traveling elytra into your battle chest plate and be a lot better equipped for any bad guys that come your way. And then, if you're not ready for the fight, switch right back to the elytra, go for your rockets, and get out of there. You definitely got a lot of options on how you can tackle this. Minecraft Vexes are annoying, but now they're a little less annoying, at least on the eyes. And that's because in 1.19.3, the Vexes had their models changed to look more like Allays, which not only means that we don't have to look at this eyesore anymore, but it also makes more logical sense. And now it seems like the pillagers are trapping these Allays so that the evokers can turn them into deadly Vexes, which is a lot more impressive of a spell than just turning a blue sheep red. I guess they gotta work from their magic somewhere. Finally, we've got a feature from Bedrock placed into Java, which is that now if you were to go dye items that have already been dyed into a different color, we can actually change their color back, which means you don't just need white wool to make yourself blue wool. But if your wool was already dyed red, then you can actually change the color like so, which gives you a lot more freedom for how you craft these things. And I love this feature enough when it was put in vanilla tweaks. I like it a lot better in a game. Hey, even if it doesn't make logical sense, I'll overlook it this time. It could just be our little secret. And sheep's wool is the only color that's changing, since now potion colors have changed to be a lot more distinct since 1.19.4. And now you'll see that these match up better to the particle effects that you get when you drink them, which can be a big help for once you recognize which one of these is which, but it's also hard to call this any kind of colorblind support. And so while this change is great, if we were to get something more akin to this kind of texture resource pack that we've shown off in the past, I think that'd be an even better step going forward. Iron golems no longer spawn in villages, but instead you'll find this big guy called the Villager Brute, which is a new mob that'll help defend your villagers, but with a few key differences. Because while the Villager Brute can kill every mob the Iron Golem will, this mob will also kill creepers too. And to help keep the village even safer, these brutes can also heal any nearby villagers, which means a ton when you're getting raided. Campfires can already be used to replace furnaces, and now they can replace your rockets. Since with this change, we actually used the smokestack from a campfire to boost our elytra in the air. And personally, I think this would be fun to add in just for all the different possibilities for elytra courses. And it only takes one look at something like the new Spider-Man game or Tears of the Kingdom to see just how fun it is when you can light a fire and then ride the current up in the air into the sky. And it would make a lot more sense than using a whole bunch of cows and entity cramming to do it. And since that's already been in the game, I think it's hard to say this is any weirder. Now when you beat the game and the credits start playing, you don't have to worry about missing anything, since not only are we able to speed up the credits scrolling down the screen, but we can also scroll back up to see if you miss anything. Though, speaking as someone who's read the credits before, even if you take the time to read them, they don't help out that much anyway. You're best sticking to the escape key on your keyboard and just skipping these. But if you don't want a horse to travel with, but rather a boat, well, you can always make one mid-air, and then land in that after you craft it mid-air, saving yourself from all fall damage, and looking very cool when you do it. And when you watch Dream pull it off real time, it does look impossible, and I wouldn't say it's far from it, but my friend Rekrap was able to study doing this on his single-player world. And there, the lag's even less than it would be in a multiplayer server. And I mean, for him, it went on to become his most popular video, so I'd say that was a skill worth learning, and I think you should try to learn it too. In Bedrock Edition, if you were to build a cycle of pistons like this and have them extend, then what you'll see, even though it's confusing, is this bug where you get teleported to x equals 0 on the axis. And while this is a pretty big glitch, and it could be pretty dangerous if used incorrectly, it could also make for some funny traps or pranks. I mean, think of it, you're just watching the block feed tape redstone machine, and then 1 second, you're instantly teleported to the middle of nowhere. No explanation, no feedback, it's great. If you've ever forgotten that you're wearing an elytra, you'll be happy this one exists. Since unless you're playing in third person or you just checked your inventory screen, it's hard to be exactly sure if you remember to put this on, which could lead you to jump off of a cliff and quickly get a reminder that you didn't equip it. So with this idea, our armor bar would look a little different, where the elytra would take up one slot on the left side of the armor bar. It's an elegant solution for sure, and one that could save me from accidentally dying in my world, which I'm all the more thankful for. Here's how to moonwalk in Minecraft. All we need is an elytra. First off, we're gonna fly down to the ocean, and then hold up the spacebar so that we push ourselves back up to the top of the water. And then from there, we can just start walking backwards, which is a fun sight for sure, but remember, this will use up some of your elytra durability, proving that even the best dance moves have their expiration date at some point. Even though you can't see it, I'm wearing a full set of armor right now, and the way that's possible is that we're able to change our attributes through this command. So sure enough, we can give ourselves a full suit of netherite armor that no one's able to see, which would be a fun prank to pull on your friends during a PvP competition. After all, it looks like you should be easy to kill, but the truth is, not as simple as that. And that isn't even the only attribute that we can change. We can also make it so that we attack a lot stronger too, letting us get God mode without your friends being none the wiser. By crafting together a normal torch and an arrow, we can get ourselves the new torch arrows. And the idea here is simple. Load these up with your bow, and you can shoot them to place a torch where they land, which when you're exploring the caves below can be an invaluable resource. Let's face it, without a gamma boosting mod, these caves are big and it's hard to see the other end. So this is at least a new way to find it. And it could also give you a cheaper alternative to getting a flame bow, just not as renewable as one, which I think is a fair trade-off, letting us light up both your world and your enemies. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?